Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to askNK. So today we will be taking a front dive directly into Substance Painter 2020.1, exploring all of the new features that they have actually announced, take a look at some of them that works, some that doesn't really work as much as we expect, and driving a simple conclusion about what you guys should keep in mind before you start using this tool. And of course, if you want to get a copy of Substance, you can go over to Substance 3D or take a look at the links in the description where you'll be able to get a free copy of Substance that you can use for 30 days. And it's also worth saying that there would be a Substance in the license giveaway, which will be announced very soon. At the same time, I would like to give a huge shout out to the winners of the Relution giveaway. Announcement for that is also going to be coming very soon, as we will showcase their work and also make a publicity about them both on the Relution page and also on the channel. So with that said, let's get right into Substance Painter 2020.1. So with Substance Painter open, you would notice that there is actually nothing too much with Substance Painter 2020 compared to what we had in Substance Painter 2019.3. The only difference which you would definitely see is right now we now have Python, owing to the fact that they have, started migrating all of their plugins and their primary scripting language from JavaScript over to Python. And plugins that is available for JavaScript now exist in this JavaScript menu, and the ones for Python now exist here. Some very interesting things which you would also find out is right now, if you take a look within the material section and you proceed to type the word decals, there is now a set of decals that is available, and we're also going to talk about how you can get started with working with them. So one other interesting thing which you also love to see is the new improved automatic UV unwrap. So for this, we're going to jump over to Blender, and with this we're going to take a look at some things that you guys need to keep in mind while trying to work with this tool. So directly here in Blender, you would notice I have two separate skateboards. So the very first one is our traditional skateboard, and if I simply switch this over to shaded, you would see right here that we have this and it has textures, and having textures for some reason means that we have UVs. And for this other one, I've also gone ahead to delete the UVs, and if you want to take a look at how you can delete these UVs, it's pretty simple. So you can go through, select the object, and then go over to your UV map and delete the UVs directly from here. So for this particular model, I've gone ahead to delete the UV and also exported this model all the way out. And we're going to export this model and bring it into Substance Painter and take a look at how Substance is going to handle the UV unwrapping. So with this said, I'm going to open a new project and load up the skateboard, which is exported as OBJ. And you will also notice that right here it is stated as Auto Unwrap version 4.0 beta, and I'm just going to go through and simply click on OK. Now once we click on OK, you can notice that it does a very good automatic UVing, actually going through and separating these things individually by the set of objects that exist independently. So let's jump over to Blender and play with Suzanne's and see how you can get this one working. So for this next example, we're going to go over to Blender, get Suzanne, and bring her right back here. And you can also see that we have something pretty interesting going on with Suzanne. So what is happening is the UV has also figured out that there is more than just one mesh here, and it has split the mesh in all of the parts. It's also worth keeping in mind that the automatic UV is still in its beta, and the new improvement simply says that once you go over and load up your maps, you would notice that we have a tiny option button. Now this option button allows you to generate any missing data that has to do with seams, UV islands, and also packing. And you can also choose to recompute this, and we're going to try this one out and give it a little test to see if it is holding up or if it is still something that is subjected to improvement over a period of time. Now I've also gone ahead to try this with Suzanne, and for this case we've deleted our UVs, and by simply deleting the UVs in Blender, the next thing which we're going to do is define our seams. And for defining seams, we just need to select a couple of places, mark those parts as seams, and bring them right back into Substance. And bringing them back into Substance, you can literally see that nothing really happens. So maybe since it says it's going to generate missing seams, let's try this one out and see what's going to happen. So we're back in Blender, and directly in Blender we're going to simply do something else which has to do with defining some seams and unwrapping it. Since we already have our seams done previously, I'm just going to go ahead and unwrap this, And with this done, the next thing which I would like to do is to define a seam around the nose and not unwrap that particular one, but bring this tool back into Substance and see if Substance will be able to read this. So we have this tool back into Substance, and now you can see that it tries as much as possible to automatically recompute these, or simply regenerate the missing data, but we don't really have that. And if we go back and compare back and forth with what we have in Blender versus what we have directly here, of course this might be very lovely to see that maybe it happens with some other apps, but for the apps which I've tried, which is Blender and Maya, for the meantime we'll also notice that we don't really have the automatic unwrap happening as much as we want. So it's still not generating those missing data, especially when you've already marked the seam, and this is also something subjected to change, and I wish that the guys from Substance can go through and fix this one. So the next thing which we're going to talk about is baking. So for baking, there is a huge update that is now in the ambient occlusion baking and also in the curvature baking. Now you can simply load up your assets, just simply going to rebake this map. So I'm just going to go ahead and bake this. And if you select the ambient occlusion, you can now notice that down here that you have a tiny bar that states that you can now use the ground plane. So you can choose to turn on the ground plane on and off, and you can also choose to offset this as what height you want this ground plane to be. And this is definitely going to be very helpful, as it helps simulate playing directly under the mesh, which would give it some sort of shadows coming from the ground. And this might definitely help your model depending on the kind of model you're going for. So just to give you a very simple example, we're going to compare what it looks like to bake without this, and also what it looks like to bake with the ground plane. And you can see a side-by-side comparison of this tool, and this is totally on call, and you can choose to work with this depending on what you want to create. In most cases, you might want to have some more definition in your ambient occlusion, and how you could do that is you could create a brand new layer and reload the ambient occlusion map directly on top of it, just to serve as more of a color layer. And this might actually help you, and this is a couple of tricks that you can have up your sleeves which you can get going with. And one of the very beautiful things to also keep in mind is you could literally notice that our baking was really done fast, and this is because the baking right now is now RTX accelerated, which means that because we're using the NVIDIA RTX 5000, we can literally get some very good performance happening, and we can actually get our baking done right. So if you're using an RTX, you can now leverage off the power of your GPU and get your baking done really fast. And for the curvature as well, you can also notice that the curvature is done properly, as once we hover around this, you can still simply check that. And you can also check this by simply going directly from here and selecting curvature, and you can now take a look at what your curvature looks like. And to me, I think this is pretty impressive. And at any point in time you want to change your texture set, you want to change what it looks like, you can always do that from here. So with all of these things done, the next thing which we're going to take a look at, or the next thing which we're going to talk about, is how you can work with the decals. So the decals is also something else that is now here, and for you to get that, if you go over to your material section, we already talked about this before, and you type the word decals, you can simply get the decals right here. And with the decals here, it's very easy for you to now project these decals directly onto your model. So what we're going to do for our own case, if we simply switch this all the way back to material, we can now select a certain decal right from here. And if you hold down Alt on your keyboard, so if I click right here, hold down Alt on your keyboard, you can now drop this directly onto your model. And once you drop this directly on your model, you would notice that you do have this particular manipulator that you can use. This is your position manipulator, and you can see it right here. And this has to do with the rotation, so you can easily rotate things around and get some very cool stuff happening. So if we're done rotating what we want, we can just simply position this wherever we want. And because they are all parametric decals, you now also have some attributes, some parameters that you can change. So if I want to change the leak to a different color, say maybe I want to change it to a color like this, maybe I want to put this all the way to the top, so let's just simply get this all the way to this part. And maybe if I also want to scale this, I can choose to scale this as well. So let me just simply bring this down to a point like this. And if you also want to make the leak a little bit rough, if you want to change whatever you want, so if you want to change any of these parameters, you can also choose to make those changes right here. This is also something that can apply to your materials. So for example, if I simply go all the way and pick out a material like this, so let's say we want to get a material like this, hold down Alt on our keyboard, click and drag and drop, we can now click and drag and drop, we can now position this wherever we want, rotate this wherever we want directly in our scene. So let's just go ahead and rotate this. All right, so rotate this wherever and however we want directly in our scene. And with this option right now, it is now pretty easy for you to make some very cool adjustments and also use your material to paint some sort of decal effect directly onto your model. This makes a lot of sense, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will find this one very useful to work with. So while we're still doing a simple walkthrough on the new updates and tools that you can also get from here, let's take a look at something that has to do with exporting of your mesh. Now, for us to actually talk more about exporting of your mesh, you need to know how to work with displacement. All right, so with Blender open, what we're going to do is pretty simple. So we're going to simply get these up and running really quick by using a very interesting plugin that you can find on Gumroad. I'm going to link where you can find this quick plugin and how you can simply get started with it. With that, I'm going to press N, switch over to Simply Cloth, which can actually help you create cloths pretty easy. And I'm also going to select this and simply define this as collision. Now, the cool thing with Simply Cloth is it does have a couple of presets that you can work with. So in case you're trying to get some very cool clothes, you want to get clothes happening really quick, of course you can use Simply Cloth to simply get your clothes happening. So I'm also going to increase the subdivision level of what I want and then press the playback button to get some very cool cloth deformation right here. Now, this is a cloth deformation that we want, and all I need to do is proceed and tell Simply Cloth that I would like to bake this and have this as a simple object. So by simply clicking on bake from cache, I now have this object baked, and I can also go all the way back. If you're into doing animations and stuff, you can simply do that, and now you'll be able to just simply have this happening. Now, with this done, the next thing which I want to do is just simply apply this cloth so I can have this object, raise this all the way up. We no longer need this, delete that, and then take this and bring this over to Substance Painter. And with this exported, I'm just going to simply leave everything the way they are, click on OK, and discard the previous one that we have. So you would notice automatic UV is doing its job, and it's just going to bring this in, and we can go ahead and take a look at what we have. So right now we have a very lovely stuff going on right here. And anytime you're having issues like this, there is just one good way to change or fix this. And how you can change or fix that is pretty simple. Click right here and simply change this to PBR Metal Rough with Alpha Test. You'll be able to see the other side. So with this done, I'm just simply going to go all the way here, set this channel to height, and if you want to have a dedicated channel that you can work with, you can always come over to your texture channel, and if I simply bring this all the way down, click the plus sign, and you can set this to displacement. This is definitely going to be very helpful if you want to paint height differently, if you want to paint placement differently. This is going to come in pretty handy. So next thing I need to do, set this as it is, set the scale to maybe 0. I'm just going to keep this at 0.1 for now, and maybe set the subdivision count to about, let's make this 2. So if I just simply set this as 2, I can create a brand new layer like we have right there and go all the way to where we have our textures, and directly here hold down Alt and click just to make sure I have this. If it goes up, we have to add more geometry, and to give a very simple explanation of that is right now if I simply go all the way here, let's simply change this to 3D and change the lighting. If I start painting on top, you would notice we're having more, and if I bring this all the way down now and start painting, you notice we're having less. All right, so you can now start seeing that we're having all of those beautiful displacement features that we want. So if you already have maybe a cloth feature like this, or maybe you have a cloth asset that you're texturing, you can simply use this displacement feature right now and start texturing directly onto your mesh. And once you're done, you will be able to export this out with the displacements that you've painted directly in Substance. So for example, if we go over to where we have an alpha, let's say I find the dirty blurry brush, which we're going to use, I can simply go over to the size, increase the size as much as I want. Let's actually reduce that, that's too big. And then I can paint in all of these details. Now, the beautiful part about this is once you're making all of these changes, or maybe you're painting all of these details, all of these decals, and you're driving this as your displacement, you can choose to increase the subdivision count, and the more subdivision you add, the cleaner these things are, and the less subdivision you add, the less clean they are. All right, so you can choose to use the subdivision count to get this. But another thing to also keep in mind is the more subdivision you add to this, the higher the mesh you're going to get out of this. So I'm just going to set this to about 4, for example, keep it as it is, go all the way back. And if you also want to increase the height, you can also use this to increase the height, like I said earlier. All right, so if you want to scale this, you want to make it bigger, you can also use this to scale the object, or scale your paintings, and also get this one as very big. So with that, now I can now go over to File, export this mesh, and within this mesh section I can apply triangulation, or I can simply take off the triangulation if I don't want one. So if I want this to export without displacement and apply triangulation, I can choose to do that. If I want this to export the way it is and I want it to recompute the vertex normal, I can still choose to keep that, or take this out. So either ways, this is going to be pretty useful. Right now, once I proceed to exporting this, we can now go over to Blender and reload this file directly in Blender just to take a look at what we have. So with this done, you can now see that we have our mesh right here in Blender. So what we're going to do now is just simply investigate this mesh a bit. So I would go ahead and simply move this to the side so we can take a look at our original mesh right now. And then if I press tab on the keyboard, you would notice that we have way more density in terms of the mesh that we have. So this is keeping true to what Substance has promised. So it turns out to be that once you choose to export your file, or you choose to bring your file directly from Blender over to Substance, or from a DCC app over to Substance, and you bake, or you simply do some subdivisions or get some displacement applied to it, you will be able to get the higher resolution subdivision mesh and bring it over to your DCC app of choice. You can now see that we have a very high resolution mesh, and you can also check out what it looks like by simply switching the wireframe, and this is extremely high. And so you can now see that there's a couple of cool updates that is now in Substance 2020. So finally, before we leave, let's simply talk about the very nice update that has to do with exporting of your textures. So you can see that we have a very simple scorpion right here. I'm just going to talk about this. And if we go over to File and go to Export Textures, you can now notice that we have a new dialog box right here. Now within the new dialog box, you can choose to go towards the output template, select the template that best suits what you're doing. So something else interesting that you can do is within the output, you can now specify the type. You can also choose the size that you want, and individually you can go in and edit how you want the output type or the output map of all of these individual texture sets to be. So a very good example is right here. We can select this particular texture set, and we can go in here and edit how we want any of these things to be. If we want to change them to JPEG, pretty fine. If we also want to change the file type directly from here, we can also choose to change that file type directly from here. So in any way you want to make any of these changes, it is going to be extremely easy for you to now art direct and also manage how the extension or the file type or what you want to export would look like. Once this is done, you can now go ahead and hit the export button, and from here you will now notice that you have a console that shows you how your exports actually work. And once your export is done, it is pretty interesting to see that, contrary to before where you just have an OK button and an open output directory button, you can now have access to seeing what got exported, if there was errors, and if these things was done successfully. Now if they are done successfully, you can see all of these green marks, and then you can proceed to open the output directory. And this is very interesting to see how far Substance has come. And for me, I think the only thing that is left forward to see in Substance right now is a couple of nodes and maybe a manipulator handle that has to do with you being able to move your models here and there, and maybe finally getting UDIMs. But when is a question that everyone seems to be asking. And for Substance, it has actually outdone itself with this present update, and I'm very excited about some of the cool features that is now here in Substance Painter. And yeah, this is definitely going to be about it. If you want to join the giveaway that we are actually planning with Algorithmic and NVIDIA, simply keep an eye open on the notification, as I'll be making the announcement very soon. And a huge shout out to those that won the Relution giveaway challenge, and I will also be making an announcement about that as well, also stating the names and showing off what they produce within the time. And that's going to be about it, guys. I would like to know what you guys think about this new tool in the comment section. If you want to get Substance, link is going to be in the description where you'll be able to find that. And if you want to see other videos about Substance and how you can play with other tools with it, link is also going to be in the description where you can find ways that you can explore and play with this tool. And tell me what you guys think about this in the comment section. And of course, if you like this video or you learned something from this, you can go ahead and give it a like, and don't forget to share with a friend. And if you're new here, it's going to be amazing for you to hit the subscribe button and also turn on notifications so that you don't miss the next video or the next update. And until I see you guys again with a tutorial update, Free Friday, Tutorial Tuesday, tips and tricks, things like this. Peace.